Hey there, Shopaholics. You're listening to another episode of the Shop Talk Show, a podcast all about front-end web design, development, and this time browsers. Hey, I'm Dave Rupert. With me is Chris Coyer. Hey, Chris.
Yeah. Hey, Dave. What's up? We have a special guest today on Shop Talk Show. Probably one of the persons that's been on the show the most. Friend of the show, Jen Simmons, now of longtime Apple and Safari team person. Hi, Jen.
Hello. I love coming
Jen,
on podcasts.
how many times do you think you need to be on the show before you earn a co-host title?
Well, you have 667 episodes. Oh my gosh. So I don't know. I've been on 10 of them, but that's nothing compared to. Congratulations, by the way, on having well over 600 shows. That's pretty impressive.
We make it easy, I think, is our claim to fame.
Yeah. What you can see shows blow past that number, but it's when they do it like 3 times a week. These are weekly at best.
Yeah.
So it's been a long time. Okay. So, but it's exciting just to have you on generally because you're great. Hi, Jen. But also because this is a particularly fruitful time for it. Like the WebKit.org blog is just filthy with like what blog posts. In my opinion, anyway, like holy cow, there's a lot to talk about here. New stuff in web platform land and specifically stuff that Safari's shipped.
Yeah. So we, our little team of developer relations folks has grown. We added Sarani Byrick to our team recently. And so now that we've got 3 people, we are on a mission to write articles on WebKit.org and make more content. So if people haven't checked it out, the website's webkit.org. And there's all kinds of information there. Documentation about Web Inspector. If you want to contribute to the WebKit open source project, there's information. But also, we're really on a mission to create articles that are helpful to web developers, help you keep up, help you understand what's going on. And that site has done that for years and years and years. But since, I guess, March, I think we've done 1 article every week to just keep going.
That's a good clip.
Yeah, it's great.
I have noticed in my RSS reader, I want to say, there's been a turning of the tables a little bit, I want to say, just in broadcasts. And so it's been welcome. It's good to see.
Well, especially because the bar is really high because it's not like, how does float work? Every post is like, here's a brand new thing.
Yeah.
Which is a whole different style of pace.
Yeah, and it's so interesting writing when I'm on a team of really smart people who care a lot about the details and getting things to be good, because that's different than running when I used to just, publish my own personal articles alone. The other day I was writing about, I discovered contrast color, and I thought, I want to make a demo because I haven't had a chance to really learn what this is yet. So let me go. And I always open up a code pen. Let me just open up a code pen and I'll make a demo. And then I was like, wait, I should write an article about this. This is interesting. I get what this is. This is actually very useful. And then I was like, wait a minute, but all of these colors in the middle of our color picker all give the wrong value. Like this is a darker blue and it's got black as I should explain what this is. Basically it's like
okay, let's do it. We're going to do color contrast first.
Sorry.
It's a function in CSS.
We need
color dash contrast with parentheses.
Chapter marker. Here we go.
It is a new function in CSS, color contrast. Here we go. What is it?
So you would do things like say, you could set a background color to green, and then you want your text color that's going to be for the text that's on top of that green. Maybe you want it to sometimes be white and sometimes be black because, I don't know, sometimes you're using a really dark green and sometimes you're using a light green, and maybe there's a hover color, or maybe actually you're not using green, you're using a variable for your background color, and you've got a whole design system, and it can get really complicated.
It's a
way
of being like, I want a computer to decide for me what the most accessible color would be on top of it. Not me, because I'll get it wrong probably. So
hey, computer,
you do it.
Please pick black or white, black or white, and pick whichever one has more contrast against the color I just gave you. So you give it a color inside the function, and it returns either black or white. And so I was messing around with it, and I was like, wait, but that seems wrong. Why is it returning black when I think
know
it
you're
should
painting
return
it
white?
like it's a bummer already because you're like, this is a great new function. Look at how cool this function is, except for that it's wrong a lot.
Right. So then I had a little panic. I was like, wait, what is wrong? Why is this happening in Safari Technology Preview? Like, did we implement it incorrectly? So then I end up going down this giant hole, like a rabbit hole of, oh, we did it right. It's the algorithm that's wrong. But that's not our algorithm. That's the WCAG 2.2 algorithm. That's the official algorithm that, oh, and I keep seeing recently, I've been seeing a lot of articles about color contrast, and everybody's like, you got to make sure color contrast is awesome. And here's another color contrast tool. And I'm like, all of these articles and all of these tools are backed by the WCAG 2 contrast algorithm. And it turns out that
and
algorithm is not very
flawed.
good. It's flawed. That's a good word to use. Yeah,
and
if
you can't
use
just—it's complicated enough that you can't just step in as Apple and be like, we're just gonna fix this. Like that's not the
we'd
right.
have to have a better algorithm, and that's hard. And also, yeah, the spec says you should use WCAG2's algorithm, so we can't just be like, nah, we're gonna make up our own thing.
Yeah, you can't just be like, psych, we're not doing that. We like
or write a bunch of if statements. Be like, use this
whatever,
algorithm unless it's this blue that Jen put in a blog post, and then fix that one case.
You
so
can't
there's a
do
lot
that.
of conversations been going on for years, especially around WCAG3. That's a big part of why folks want WCAG3, because they want to come up with a better contrast algorithm. And there's one that somebody made, the APAC. I always say that wrong. APCA. APCA. APCA.
Yeah.
That seems like a great candidate. I love using that tool. I used it a lot when I was writing this article. But I don't know. We'll see whether or not that actually becomes. And there's lots of conversations happening that are complicated that we don't have time to talk about. But there's probably still a lot of work in front of the web standards folks to figure out a solution to this problem, because it's not simple. But meanwhile, you can use contrast color because you can sort of manually test and make sure that it's going to work just great with the colors that you have. But anyway, I brought all this up to say, I thought it was going to be a really quick article that I could write in about 3 hours and I would be done. And meanwhile, it took me about 3 weeks of going down these deep dives and having huge conversations with accessibility experts at Apple and going and finding out what the deal is with all of these things, and then having the article reviewed by, one group after another, to the point where everybody was like, yep, it's correct now. It wasn't when you started. And I like that. I like being able to put work out into the world that has a certain just rigor to it. And to help teach people, on the one hand, this function's really easy. Totally, you can start using it, once it starts hitting browsers. But on the other hand, yeah, it is complicated. And okay, here's what you need to know. But also, here's some information about, what I discovered about the contrast algorithm doesn't just apply to this function, but really applies to anybody as they're designing a design system and you're thinking, I don't know, this contrast algorithm seems a little bit wrong. Why is it telling me I should do this when I'm not sure that that's right? Well, yes, you should trust your gut and ignore the algorithm, because the goal is
let's do that. Like brass
contrast.
tacks, if you... It's almost like don't use the old one. Like if it's wrong, then don't use it. But instead make sure that it's just obviously has enough contrast, or use APCA and and kind of maybe I'll be as bold to say as don't use color contrast yet. This new function. Not only is the browser support probably not quite there for it yet, although, thank you to Safari for getting it out there, because these things take time for other browsers to pick them up. But it will become good when what's underneath it becomes a better algorithm. So it's good that it's shipped. It just needs to become better. And for now, the best thing that you can do probably is to use APCA, but then just take the values that it suggests and just use them. Yeah.
Yeah, or most of the time when people are testing for color contrast, you have, two colors, the contrast, and you're looking to see what kind of ratio they produce, and you're deciding whether or not that's good enough. And so I think there are combinations that the current WCAG2 algorithm would give you helpful information about, that you're trying to see you got a light gray
how do you know,
over
though? How
a
can
dark
you guarantee
blue.
it?
Because I think I think the problem with the current algorithm really happens only in the mid ranges.
Yeah, it's really good on the edges, but that like
Yeah.
Which is obvious anyway.
Orange, green, kind of light blue zone, it really hurts, right? So.
But also deciding to like try out the Apka tool instead is I think that is good advice. I really enjoyed that tool. It also takes, it's because I also discovered that, like,
size and weight, right? Like that's a big deal that the current algorithm just doesn't care about that at all. But you can, like, for example, it's weird to say, but you can get away with less contrast if you're at 100 pixels of font size.
Yes.
Right? Like, because there's some inherent contrast anyway.
Or you can get away with a little bit lighter contrast if you have a really bold font. Or if you have a really thin font and you think, oh, we're good because the W2 algorithm, the WCAG2 contrast algorithm says that I'm okay, that, like, maybe you're not okay because your font's actually really, really thin. What I didn't realize this, like, the WCAG2 is of incredible, specification. It's incredible. It's in very important. It's in places legally required, or it's replacing other kinds of accessibility guidelines that were predecessors, and it's an improvement on those guidelines. But it also is a bit binary in its recommendations. It's sort of like, yes, you are accessible. No, you are not accessible. And what I kind of realized through what I learned recently is that that's not really, and as a person who is now disabled by COVID, like, that's not actually how humans work. That, yes, every person ever can now definitely use this, or no, all people could definitely not use this, isn't really. So a lot of the work going into the WCAG3 guidelines are like, let's not be quite as binary. Let's give people more complex recommendations so that you can kind of, it depends. Like everything else on the web, it depends. Should you use JavaScript right now or not? I don't know. It depends. Is this contrast good enough yet? Well, it depends. Like, let's look at the size of your font, the weight of your font, and the purpose of your button, and, like, whatever. It gets complicated. But that's what I feel like the tool that the person who made the APCA tool, the tool that he made is more helpful in that way. It's less binary. It's more like giving you guidance on how you could increase contrast.
Yeah, it's weird because it'll give you like a number like 70 is accessible, or like -23 or something is also accessible. But maybe I'm misrepresenting there. But it's just this. It's like a different way to think about like the colors. Takes more kind of into. But I also found it. This is me speaking personally. I found it to be kind of like this, like, I have to get a big chart out, like a naval sea chart to like figure out, is it how many points, what's the color, what's the, so it felt like it was like a big ask to like, just be like, can I use that here? Maybe, nope. Okay. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's the appealing thing about a binary. It's like, I just want you to tell me whether or not it's good enough because I need to move on. Just tell me if I did it right.
It would be cool to see some of this stuff.
I want
like
a thumbs up emoji or a thumbs down emoji for the most part.
Have you, like, when you work on sites, people only ask you, is it accessible? They don't want a story. They just want the thumbs up or thumbs down, So, but it would be cool if our dev tools, like, could give us sort of like, well, according to AppGut, it meets like this requirement, on these backgrounds or something. But that's where I like this color contrast is awesome to me. Like somebody who works in design systems, it's like, not only am I dealing with hundreds of colors in a design system, I'm also dealing with like maybe user generated content. Like somebody's like, some app has the ability to pick your favorite color, and that's the color, the accent color for the entire app or whatever. And that, they chose pink, like I'm not equipped for that. So like, how do, I think it would be super cool if our interfaces could just kind of, this is old Jen Simmons, but like intrinsic design, like go back, like, just like, you tell me what you want and I'll try to give you the best experience I can.
Well, isn't that how the first version of this shipped to, not to like dwell on old stuff, because who knows if this will ever come back, but color contrast originally was give me a color and then a whole list of other colors. The first one was the background and the other one was like, now browser, you pick which one of these other colors is the best contrast against the background that I just gave you, which was cool. I think it's a little more design system friendly. White and black is pretty limiting, but again, like, this stuff can change, and once the algorithm's there, maybe we'll get that or what. But
Yeah, and you wrote an article about that. The function actually at that point was called color contrast, and now it's called contrast color,
yeah,
which is
a
interesting.
swapperoo.
So I read your article many times, Chris. In 2021, Chris Coyer wrote an article about contrast color function and how it worked. And the plan with the working group is to, and it might even actually already be spec'd, like, is to add those other capabilities back in, but to do so after there's an algorithm. Because the feeling is that right now, while there's a good chance that the WCAG2 algorithm will return the wrong color on certain, like the wrong result on certain colors, like, and I picked a middle tone blue on purpose because it was sort of doing the wrong thing. But on a lot of colors, a lot of colors, it does return the right result, and you can trust it. And if you have a color palette for your, design system, and you've got, 14 colors, you can test all 14 colors and see that, like, oh, you know what, actually, it does just fine on these 14 colors. So we are going to go ahead and use it on our website. We'll just, so. But if people want to learn more, they should read the article, and we can go and talk about other things. But
Yeah,
Yeah, sure. That's
interesting.
a good one.
I was going to point to colorjs.io, Leah Verou's thing. She has a page on contrast there that breaks down all the different contrast algorithms, like L star and Delta Phi star and Weber and all this stuff. So it's
I love
cool.
that you can be a nerd on just that. Like, that's so it's like niche of niche stuff.
The color science stuff goes so deep. And yeah, Chris Lilly and Leah Verou, and there's a handful of other people who've dived deep into it, and they've been driving a lot of this work in the working group and outside the CSS working group and other working groups. And that's why it's going to take a while, because it's complicated. Yeah.
Well, and that first algorithm, it was made in the like 80s, 70s or 80s on like a Tandy 1000, it hasn't updated because it's so difficult to update, to even like take into account what digital text can mean on a screen. Are we talking a Kindle now? Are we talking an iPhone? Are we talking, so.
Yeah.
Well, here's a new one we should do. Just because we have a whole list of interesting things to talk about.
Yeah.
There's push notifications on mobile, which was often held up as kind of a limitation of the web and why you might use a native app instead of writing a website, because for a long time they couldn't do this. And then it was, then a new era was ushered in where you kind of could do this. Push notifications, meaning like the kind of notification you might get from your Delta app that says, that your gate has changed, and you want that, the ability to do that for your customers because they expect it or it's useful or whatever. And it was especially tough on a website when you're not on it. There used to be an API that's like when you're literally sitting there on the website, then the website was able to do it with a particular API. But then, you could start to be able to leave the website and have it done. But that was the service workers were necessary for that. And service workers, as cool and powerful as they are, maybe are still a little scary to some people or not as willing to dig into that world. And it sounds like this new thing that y'all are calling declarative web push is able to do this job without it, or do I have that wrong?
Yeah, so we shipped in Safari on Mac, in Safari 18.5 on Mac, and also in iOS and iPadOS 18.4 for home screen web apps, because that's where web push is supported these days, is for home screen web apps on iOS and iPadOS. So just this March and this May, we shipped this thing called declarative web push. So, and probably a lot of the folks listening remember lots of this. Been a very long story from the beginning, from when Safari push was first invented back in Safari 7, 13 years ago or something, 12 years ago. And then web push came along, right? And web push came along. So it's web standards, was able to be implemented in all the browsers, where Safari push was really designed, like the APIs and such. It was designed to directly tap into the push notification system that all the native apps use on Apple platforms. So in some ways it was really cool and easy to use, but also that couldn't be a web standard. So web push came along, but when it was invented right in the same era that service workers were invented. And so there were a couple things that were sort of qualities of the way those set of specifications fell together. It was that you, as a developer, you're going to use JavaScript, 100% JavaScript. You got to write your own push notification thing. And
like listener, right? In
yeah,
the
you got to write
service
it all.
worker, it's kind of
Maybe you're
long
going to use a
running.
library, and it'll be easier and faster because you're using a library. But it's one of those like farther away from the metal because you've got to write all this code yourself. And so what it does today is you end up sending a ping to the user's to the user's service worker that's installed, and it wakes the device up if the device is asleep, or if the person's not on the website or whatever. Especially that's what people care about, like you just described, Chris. So it will wake the device up, and then it will run some JavaScript, and giving every web developer on the planet, including the ones who are up to things that are nefarious, the ability to ping a device at any time and to wake it up and to run arbitrary JavaScript is, like that was part of our hesitation for years.
Dangerous as hell.
We were trying to figure out, like, okay, how do we do this and not let it be abused? Which is why we have limitations in place where you have to send a user visible notification. You're supposed to be using this to send notifications, so you got to send a notification. If you don't send a user visible notification, but you're just pinging the device a bunch of times, then we're going to cut you off. Like, we're going to unsubscribe you.
It has to like visually show something, not just be like calculate pi to 500 digits.
Navigator.get geolocation or something. Yeah.
Run something else in the background. So and it's also why it's limited to home screen web apps, because there's another level of trust that if a person cares enough of a user cares enough about a website that they've saved it to their home screen, then there's a signal that they trust that website. And that it's not just a website that they, I don't know, in a phishing attempt, they accidentally clicked on a link for some random text message they got, and then something got installed on their phone, and they,
it's inherently limiting, but it's good, like whatever. And so I could imagine, you getting grief that like, make it easier to do home screen web apps then, like that's always criticized as being a very buried thing that to be able to do at all. But whatever.
That's a whole other conversation to have. But we are always thinking about the users and what is it like for users, and are they going to be annoyed over and over again? Is the worst of the code that might get written going to hurt users in some way? And we're trying to find a balance. We're always looking to try to find a balance. And we felt good about the balance that we struck when we shipped web push, but also as we were doing that work, we were noticing several things. So one of them is that most web developers end up using JSON to deliver the notification. And a lot of those JSON files looked sort of similar to each other, although not the same. They came in various different variations. But we were like, well, what if we just take the JavaScript out of it? What if we don't insist that people use service workers? What if we don't insist that the web developer write all this JavaScript and figure out, like, build their own push system? What if we just make it that there's a standardized JSON file format, and if you hook things up in this very specific way and you send this JSON file, you're done. That's it. You don't have to do anything else.
Jen, I don't know. I really like setting up this complex machinery. So it's the most favorite part of my job. So really, like, it's just like you just send a blob of JSON down, or I guess, how does that come from a server? Do I render it in the page, or how does that work?
This is where I would want Brady to come on the show and explain it.
We can
and
patch
you can read
Brady
the article
in.
that Brady wrote. So, but the JSON, because also this whole thing, the declarative web push is definitely designed to be a progressive enhancement. So it's designed to be able to be used today, and you just make a few changes to how your system is set up today, but you can still support other browsers and send web push to all those other browsers, and then also have if someone is using the browsers that support declarative web push or the web apps that support declarative web push, then the declarative web push is what's used instead. And there will always be reasons to use something more complex. Like that's going to still be supported, but if you're just trying to send a simple push, which is what, people are doing 80% or so a lot of the time, you just start out where the first member is web_push 8030. You put in there 8030 as the place
Fork
where
or
it's going,
something?
and that's just
Okay.
sort of a signal to say, hey, this is ready for web push. And then you've got to, like, if you're using JSON now, you might be using like headline and description or whatever, but really what you need to do is change it to be title is what it's going to get called, and I don't know
Okay.
what the other second part is
So it's
called,
like
but
a
then
standard format on here.
Yeah, it's
Body,
the standard format.
navigate. I have it shared screen here just so people on YouTube can see it, but it really is just a very simple piece of JSON. And interestingly, the API really is just hangs off window, so you don't need a service worker to do it. Does it trigger when I call this thing, window.pushmanager.subscribe? Does it trigger a little, a thing I have to agree to? Probably, right? Like, this website wants to send you push notifications.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a whole process where the user is going to say, yes, I would like to subscribe to push notifications. That's all the same. This doesn't actually change any of
It
that.
doesn't change that.
It's sort of after the person's subscribed to notifications, what does the web developer need to do to set it up? But it is more efficient battery wise because you're not kind of spinning up the whole service worker in order for it to run, and also because we have a fierce dedication to user privacy, JavaScript on our devices expires at some point. And I know we hear a lot from developers how frustrated sometimes they get about that, but it is very intentional to protect users from things, nefarious things that unfortunately some sites are doing. And when JavaScript expires, like, that can start to cause problems for sites that are trying to do good things, that are trying to do the right thing. And this is a way, like, the JavaScript expiring won't affect you at all in this case because you're not using JavaScript. This is all sort of happening. This is actually much more like how push notifications work for Apple.
Yeah, I mean,
Apple
there's
ecosystem.
nefarious, and then there's capitalism. There's like Uber Eats today probably has sent me 2 already. That's from their native web app, but they really want me to order a sandwich for lunch, and they're very incentivized to show that to my face. So any website that's in that same situation is going to want to do that. But but
I'm not talking
that's
about
what
those
Apple's
folks.
good at.
I'm not talking
Yeah.
about those folks, actually. I'm not talking, because we don't have an opinion about what a website should or should not do. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about somebody who's trying to steal the money out of your bank account. I'm talking about somebody who's trying to track your location and follow you everywhere you ever go. I'm talking about somebody who's, like, really doing things that are bad.
Or even just like push notification, run Bitcoin miner for 30 seconds
Exactly.
until it times out, and then
Yeah,
like
that sort of, like,
Yeah.
yes. Things that
Yeah.
are bad.
yeah. Well, and you mentioned, like, occasionally the browser will release from cache. That's the polite way to say it, but just delete its memory of you. That part is interesting. Because even on the, like, Chromium Edge side, that's like more I'm learning about. It happens more than you think. I think we as web developers believe this thing like, oh, if I use the Google's jQuery, and no one, we all download it, but that slowly turned into this, like, nope, browsers, like, uncache that all the time. And then, like, even like your bundle asset, it would, bundle 12345 JS, like, sometimes that just gets nuked because the browser need to make room for another website, so it's really interesting. It's just interesting how browsers work. And then, like you're saying here, like, they have to think about, like, a feature with the entire threat model, to figure out how it can be safe, and
Yeah, especially
then,
because our devices, especially the ones in your pocket, have an incredible amount of information about you, about your family, about your contacts, about your intimate life, about your money, about your whole life is there. And when the web was invented back in the 90s, when we were making websites, these are not the things that we were thinking about. And it's, yeah.
Well, the twist here is the declarative stuff from the 90s is super resilient to that. Like you're saying, it's like you just have a format, and it looks like 8030 is the RFC number, right? So, okay. But like, it's just, this is the standard format to put a push notification. This is great.
Yeah, and I think this is the kind of thing that just feels so elegant and good because it makes it way easier for web developers. It means far more people who maybe have thought, I should add push notifications to our site, but that seems really hard. I started to try to read about it and I got halfway through, but then I needed to go work on something else and I've been meaning to get back to it, but I don't know. It seems really hard and I don't know how we're supposed to...
I do think there's a bar for service workers. It's just a bar that a lot of web developers are not willing to jump into. They're
this
weird
would be
and
a
complicated.
cool, set up a push notification server with WordPress or something like that. Like this would be a good blog post waiting to happen. Just like, I blog... free sandwiches today, and I get a push notification about free sandwiches. Like,
yeah.
give me
that
hello world.
Happen.
Yeah,
it might make it much easier for more developers to be able to implement web push, and for those who are already doing it to be able to leverage as kind of a power efficiency and a more robustness, and eventually over time, as hopefully more browsers, more web app technology stacks will adopt this. And
where is the list of secret identifiers that, like, if it's a WordPress blog post and I hit new post and now it's my job as a server to ping something and know so that all those users get those notifications. Do I keep a list of IDs in my own database somewhere of where to send, or is like Apple helping or something?
Yeah. I asked these questions to our engineer, Brady, and because I wanted to understand it better myself. And he basically was like, no, you don't do any of that. You just it's all already taken care of. Like it's all already, the operating system is already taking care of all of that. And I know what I just said is super vague.
No, it's okay.
No.
But it doesn't
yeah.
know when I hit publish on my WordPress site. It just can't know that. I have to tell something that.
Yeah.
What do I tell?
I think it's about hitting a URL. I think you hit a URL and then it's from there. It's taken care of.
Interesting. No, I'd love to know more. Like that's like, even with like passkeys, it's like, show me the end-to-end implementation so I can just imagine how it works in my thing. It's cool. I don't know. I'm like,
yeah. Well, and I apologize for not having more in-depth knowledge myself, but do read the article on WebKit.org and keep an eye on WebKit.org for more content about this coming, and because it is. It is
appealing.
Even
for me, it moves it from like, I ain't even going to mess with that to like, maybe I'm going to mess with that.
Mm-hmm.
It puts it into that category.
Well, like adding push notifications to whatever CodePen. You gotta
Yeah,
we're talking bajillions of
don't worry
dollars,
about that,
but like that's.
But I think somebody typing you a message is okay. That, in my mind, that crosses the line of like, Dave literally mentioned me in a comment. I should be able to opt in to getting that notification. That's acceptable to me. A like is maybe not good enough.
Well, and those kinds of things are up to you as a person who runs the site to figure out what's good user experience design for your users, and do you want to have several different flavors of notifications and provide an easy way for people to opt out. And even if you don't, because maybe, or you would, of course, but maybe another website isn't providing easy ways to turn it off. Well, the operating system provides an easy way for users to turn it off. So you can just go into settings and turn it off and be like, I don't want notifications from these folks anymore. So the user is definitely in control of that. But that's not, we're not, that will work itself out. Like whether or not it's a good user experience will work itself out the same way it does on any other website. Are you using hot pink for your background, or are you using a background that people can actually tolerate, right? That's up to you to figure out. Let's talk about form control styling.
Totally.
Okay, we can go into that. I definitely want to do the typography stuff too. Of course, there's way more stuff than one show can fit, but I actually know the least about this and am the most interested in it, perhaps. So let's do it.
Yeah, let's try to keep it tight. So form control styling is one of the number one things that people desperately wish the web was better at, because they want to use the HTML.
This select. Is that the
Well,
classic
select
one?
is
Yeah.
select is a little bit different, and I can explain what's going on with that because there's a lot more
Okay.
happening with select with everything else. But like you're like, oh, I have this checkbox, I need to make it look like our brand. Oh, I have this button, that's not so hard. I have this, input field. I have this file upload field, and there's a button for the file upload button. Like, I need to style
Yeah.
all of
Okay.
these things, and a lot of folks know about the Open UI project and their efforts, and they got together several years ago and did a pretty fantastic job of researching where are all the pain points and where is it that people wish that they could put little icons inside the drop down menu or style the drop down menu. A lot of the things that they have focused on are functionality, and a lot of that work has led to, we're just getting so much these days with popover and anchor positioning, and this stuff is not necessarily open UI, but they sort of open the door to a lot of changes to functionality, a lot of new things happening in HTML, and select menu is definitely, or select is definitely, the new select is definitely all part of that. But meanwhile, as OpenUI was sort of tackling one form control at a time, or one problem space at a time, if there was sort of a lack of a form control, they weren't looking at the big picture problem, even though it had been discussed. The big picture, they were sort of going deep in specific verticals, and we were very interested in also tackling the across the board problem of, like, I apply a background color to my form field and it went from looking to looking like it's 1995. Why did that happen? Or I do want to, like, why do all these why do all these form controls have background colors on them, and I have to add a background color to every single one of them? Why do all these form controls have some opinion about fonts, and I told them I want them to be this font, but the font actually isn't even applying? And why do I have to write so much CSS to style these forms? I can't even really remember that CSS. I copy and paste it from one project to another. Or years ago, when I was working full-time as a web developer, I used Formalize Me a lot because it was a quick way to kind of re-theme the forms. But I felt like I never really understood how to style that thing. I just copy-pasted other people's code. So turns out there's reasons, and we could do a whole show about it, but not today. But so at Apple, we thought through a lot of, like, what is this going to take for this to actually happen? And can this actually happen? I think in part the blocker for decades, literally decades, has been
do it all at once kind of thing. Like, can we just
do it all at once, for sure. But also the blocker for decades was this debate about, is it okay to style a form control, or is it actually part of the operating system, and does it need to continue to be part of the operating system, or can you retheme them? I think clearly design has taken us to a place where the answer is yes. If this big website wants to restyle all the form controls and make them look like their brand, users will not be confused. They will know what to click on. They're going to totally be able to fill out this form. So we need to build something in CSS that will let people do that. So it's going to be appearance base. If you apply appearance base to a form control, this will probably end up in everybody's reset style sheet in, I don't know how many ever years this takes to roll out. Then you will automatically opt into a new way for things to work.
Right. We're seeing this now with select. This is I've been noticing this more and more as an opt-in in CSS. Like, I want this new behavior. Otherwise, leave it the way it was, which is cool for backwards compatibility, because it means that you either know what you're doing and you're opting into this, or it's just going to stay the way that it was, which means you're not going to break websites, which is pretty cool.
Yes. Yeah. And appearance, the new select definitely works this way because we've all been collaborating together. People, I think when they first heard the efforts that Apple's been working on with the form controls, they got worried because they thought we were doing something that was different than OpenUI, and we were competing with them and trying. And it's like, no. We're totally all working together on all of these things. And
there's
so
a little bit of, not that I agree necessarily, but there's also you shipped input checkbox switch.
Yeah,
which is
switch.
like, oh, dude, that's it's nice, but it's also like, where'd that come from? Like it does seem like, I don't know. You did it because Apple has switches.
Yeah. So basically, for those who don't know, input type equals checkbox. If you add the switch attribute, then In browsers that have support for Switch, we'll change the UI to be a switch. And for browsers that don't have support for Switch, it will continue to be a checkbox. I'm actually really surprised that other browsers haven't adopted it yet, because the switch control is a very common interface. And people were doing all sorts of wild things to hack a checkbox to make it look like a switch. CodePen is full of some beautiful examples of this.
Yeah, and we get criticized for it too, because they're not. I think we've really done the best we can and listen to the feedback, but I think there's whole blog posts on like the problems with our switch control, because it's complicated. Like, which things are you allowed to click on that change the value? For example, if the switch is on the left, but you have a label on the right that says, email on or something, should you be able to click on email on the right? What should that do? Should it only ever drag the switch control back to the right, or should it just generally be a toggle that's happy to push it back to the left as well? And what if there's two labels on both sides? Are they both toggles, or do they just drag the thing to one side? It's just and some of it feels like just an opinion. I don't know. It's tricky.
Yeah, no.
But this is nice. It's nice to be standardized.
Building this UI is really hard and complicated, especially when you start to think about multiple operating systems and the expectations of different users and different kinds of input and output devices that people use for accessibility. Like, it gets quite. This is why it's a good idea to not build your own controls, but to use the built-in HTML controls. And then, so the idea with this project. So I should say appearance. The new select uses appearance base dash select as its switch. And when
not base,
you do,
like you said, base select.
Yeah, not base. It will be base later. Like in the future, when appearance base ships for all the controls, you'll be able to use appearance base on selects to do exactly what appearance base select does today. But the working group, in having long conversations about this, figured out that we couldn't let select do appearance base now, because we could end up creating web compat problems in the future, and we would end up breaking the web in the future. So for now, it's a little bit of a weird, like, a base select is a little bit of a, like, temporarily you're going to use base select. Later we'll delete this, or not delete it, but like later you can delete it from your mind and you'll never use it again. You'll just use select. But for now, it's appearance based select. But it's a little bit of a preview, so that select menu could ship, new select could ship now, like in this era, and all this rest of this work is still in progress. So the idea is that you apply appearance based to any form control in this future, in several years in the future. And
what does it do? It opts you in, but does it do anything immediately?
Yeah, it does. It does several things at once. So the first thing it will do is change the secret shadow tree DOM structure, so that every browser has the same DOM structure underneath the hood, and it's standardized across browsers.
I see. Because like input type range is classic, where across the browsers that all the little nibs and nubs and crap have different things in different browsers. This will standardize that.
Yeah, right now if you use appearance auto, you get, at least in Safari, you get the operating system controls. So if you're on Vision OS Safari and you use appearance auto, you get a form control that looks like it belongs on Vision OS.
It's like the replaced element, right? Like it literally digs into the operating system's internals and surfaces. Like,
but you don't have to say appearance auto; it just is appearance auto, right?
Yeah, appearance auto is the default. So, but if you say appearance base, it stops doing that, and it starts using a web standardized DOM structure under the hood.
And it's not going to have border bevel picks or whatever.
Yeah.
That's the second
well,
thing
I think of the button, because buttons are not hard to style, but if you don't, like, that's the weird one that that does weird font family. Like your button is going to be...
Right. So that's the second thing that happens. The second thing that happens is because appearance none was a different attempt to solve this problem with a different approach, and it turns out it kind of works and kind of didn't work out so well. Appearance base is like a different, instead of appearance none was sort of like, well, I won't describe it. What appearance base will do is it will change the DOM structure, and it will apply a new user agent style sheet to those form controls. And the new user agent style sheet is not at all like the flavor of the 90s, and it is much more the way everything else in CSS works. So for one, it inherits fonts. So it will, if you've applied a font to the body, it gets applied to your form control. The backgrounds are transparent. So if you have a gradient purple to green background in your for your web page, you can see it through the form control. If you wanted your form control to be white, great, put white on it, but you don't have to put white on it because
Hey,
it's
Jen,
going
I
to be
think you
transparent.
quit talking now. We don't need my designers to know about this. That would be cool. So, no,
And
that's
there's
great. That's awesome.
There's lots of other details about the default styles that are similar, that they act much more the way everything else in CSS acts, and they stop trying to pretend like they're a special snowflake and that designers shouldn't change them. They're like, please style me. And at the same time, and this is the part we haven't reached yet, we still need more debate and discussion about this, they should, by default, look really good, really generic, and ready to go so that you don't have to override them.
Right. Like you might in the future say appearance base on all these elements and then just that's it. And it will be an upgrade.
I mean, kind of like if you use a framework where you use Bootstrap or something. Like there's so much code already going on. Like you can change the styling, but you don't have to. Because the
nice
border
that's
is pretty
a goal.
good.
It should be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, people have reasons now, I'm sure, for using Bootstrap, but I feel like part of the reason you reached for it back in the day was like, I can't spend weeks or months getting forms right, across browsers and everything. So seems like a huge solve for browsers going forward. So.
And it sounds like a lot of this will... Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
No, you go.
Well, a lot of... There's so much of the colon stuff, right?
That's part 3.
That's part 3. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Step 1, replaced elements.
Just...
Step 2, styles. Part 3 is parts.
So parts. So one last thing about the part 2, the reason that the thing that's hard about it right now is there's kind of 2 different, because we wrote a bunch of design principles, by the way. When we got started, the first thing we did is come up with design principles a la HTML5. One design principle is, hey, make this code, the UA styles, be as simple as possible so that when people want to override it, there's as little as possible to override, and there's not a lot of mystery meat going on where you have to deconstruct what's happening. But then the other design principle is they should be ready to go out of the box so that you don't have to do anything with them at all. If you just want to hit appearance base on all your form controls and keep going and not style them, that they're going to look fantastic. But those 2 ideas contradict each other because, for instance, some of the form controls have roundedness to them, or rounded corners, because they have to, or else you wouldn't know what they do.
Which way you're going to go? They either all got to be rounded or none of them.
Yeah, but right now we have some of them have rounded corners because otherwise they're not functional, but everything else has square corners. And as a designer, that drives me nuts. I'm like, we can't have square corners and rounded corners sitting next to each other. We need to round all the corners off. And then, actually, it would really look better if we put a little bit of drop shadow on a lot of these. And then people are like, yeah, but now you've got to remove the drop shadow and remove the rounded corner if that's what. So there's more discussion to be had there to really come to the right default
a place
styles.
where different browsers can have different default style sheets, or is that's
No.
not what we want? Okay,
Right.
Because I was like, what if whatever Ubuntu buys Firefox? I'm making stuff up. And they want to make Ubuntu Fox, and they want the form controls to always look like the Ubuntu style guide.
They could do that with not appearance base, right?
Yeah.
Like you're free to do that in your user agent style sheet, but as soon as you applied appearance base, now you're not free to do that anymore.
We have
Exactly.
or whatever. We basically
What you
are
just described
CSS
is what they could,
resetting.
Yeah, what they could do with appearance auto.
Okay.
Right? Somebody made a new browser today. They can change. I mean, when Edge and Chrome had a big project several years ago where they changed the appearance auto styles as
and
Edge
fix
adopted
date picker
Chromium.
kind of, or yeah.
And they might get updated again in the future as design trends change. The default styles on the web have definitely changed over the years.
Okay,
But the idea here is that we will lock ourselves into standardized, same across all the browsers, default styles.
Cool. So
Which means that when you
auto is-
override them, you're overriding them, and they'll work identically in every browser. Because just like Times New Roman headlines that look ugly and blue links that are underlined and have to be overridden, like you'll be in that world where form controls will always look like 2018 or 2028 or whenever they ship. They're going to always look like a design trend of that time, and you're going to always override them, but they'll be the same in every browser. And then the third part is parts. So because they have a standardized DOM structure and because they have standardized UA default styles, then there's going to be a pile of pseudo elements where you'll be able to target, oh, you want to change the color of the little slash between the dates in the date picker embedded in the
there's
page.
going to be like
Yes.
35 of them
I
for
have to have
date
it, Jen.
pickers.
I have to have it.
You place the checkbox, the check mark in the checkbox. You don't have to go to appearance none and then build your own checkbox from scratch by making an empty div and rotating it.
And they literally are parts, right? Because that's the same terminology as a shadow DOM concept.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna beat up every Gen Z kid. They'd have no idea how easy they're gonna have it.
But to be clear, right now this is all still being worked out in. We went to first public working draft, so we're really excited. But it's going to take a while. There's still a lot of work to do. It's not in any browser yet. There's not even experimental
Seems like a big one.
yet.
Seems like a 5-year blaster. Maybe not, because a lot of the groundwork has been laid with appearance and all that. But it seems like, holy cow, how are you all going to agree on the shadow DOM structure of every single one of these? That's a journey.
Yeah. It feels like the really big decisions have been made and there's consensus, which is incredible because it's literally been 30 years of not having consensus. But the details, working out all the little details, is still in front of us.
I'm going to do an over-under bet on whether they're going to be rounded corners or not.
Instead of calendar? Oh, okay.
No, just that one thing only. Just
rounded
$100 on, I bet they're going to have like border radius 4 pixels. That's my bet.
I'll take the under. I'll take the under.
You're going to go squares?
No, I'm going like 3-2 is what I'm feeling.
Because if one of the stated goals is it all needs to look nice, I feel like a button with no rounding on it is just not going to fly. It's not going to look good.
Yeah, I think actually in something I saw, because it's half built, the switch isn't round at all. It's totally square.
Yeah, see? No, it's
like
not
a square toggle
work
in
for
a square box inside a square box.
That's the one that you might
change.
get away with, even if it was square, or even if everything else was square. I could see the switch as being, because it's so different.
Yeah, it's got to be rounded.
It also is interesting for Apple because you've done some of the perhaps the weirdest implementations of like a select on iOS is like this big ass weird spinner thing comes up, and as soon as you go appearance space, I assume that's out. You're not going to have that anymore. You know what I mean? The thing that you swipe your finger and that's a very different experience, and I assume that has to go. Only when you opt out of it. You know?
You do remind me though. I should be clear. We did decide to bifurcate the project into things that are embedded in the page and the overlay pickers that pop up, and to only tackle the things embedded in the page for now in order to be able to get the project done and to ship all of that all at once.
So you're saying the spinner might live on.
Yeah, well, for instance, calendar, there's two parts really. There's not parts, but there's two sections, things about it. There's when you look at it, you see a date written on the screen. And then when you click on the date, a calendar appears.
Right. Same with color.
So the goal right now is just to let people style in this new way using appearance space everything that's embedded into the page. Because figuring out how to make a shadow DOM, like a web standardized shadow DOM for calendar pop-ups,
sure.
That's a multi-year project all by itself, and that should be and it can ship by itself. How to figure out how to standardize the pop-up that shows up when you click on a color picker swatch, oh my gosh, that's a whole other giant project. So those and in some ways the select is the same way. That pop-up that shows up when the select shows up is also a very complicated multi-year project that's going to take a lot of work. That happens to be being done now, it's already on its way. So the in-page controls are the big thing that's going to happen all at once. And then all the pickers are going to happen individually one by one.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was like, we can do this incrementally, right? I can't, I can't leave the industry before this happens. The pickers are tough, but select is almost done, right?
I thought they were intentionally.
We're kind of close, right? So
select is. I think it's shipping in Chrome. Select is standardized. Select is ready to be implemented, ready to be shipped. I think there's a lot of hope for being able to do the across the board change in the way that CSS affects form controls in the page, all at once. I think that's a very realistic project that can absolutely get done. It's just that when you start to talk about something like the calendar, well, what should the DOM structure for calendar be? If you only ever want to show a month, with a little arrow to go to the next month, then it's not that hard. But people don't want just that. They want to be able to do all sorts of wild things. What
No,
if you
they
put
want-
all the days of the year on at once? What if you put 6 years on your calendar all at once? What if you never put dates and you only put months? What if you only...
They want to drag to select weeks. They want to
Yeah.
Buddhist
Yeah, so-
calendars.
Yeah, that's a
they
whole-
want all this stuff. Yeah, they want everything.
Well,
you know?
we could pivot this into some more color stuff, because this one was particularly interesting to me. Is that input type equals color is has existed for quite a while, I guess. But the point of it was to pop up a color picker, and that pop up again will not be part of this, right? Because it's a thing that pops up.
Yes.
But the thing that pops up is like is never, it doesn't feel the same as to me as the calendar thing that pops up, because that feels like, oh, it's just in the browser, and like Chrome built that, or Apple built, or somebody, like the browsers build that, whereas color always seems to punt to the OS. The color pops up some kind of like OS level color input thing, which doesn't seem like the web has any right to specify, really. Like that's just let the operating system do that. Maybe that could and should change or something. But anyway, the more interesting part here is that Safari was first out of the gate, to me, as far as I know, with this like color space equals display P3 or whatever, which is, we've had P3 colors for a hot while now, and color has been long behind in being able to offer. And there's two different aspects to it. Like, is that a valid value? Like, what does the value look like? Because for a long time, the value was always just hex, no matter what you did in the color picker. But now the value seems to be able to be something else, like OKLCH or
big
something.
string.
Now,
like
I might have that a little wrong, as I think you could force that value into the value of a color input, and it wouldn't like reject it. It's just you couldn't get it out of the color picker. And now there's actually a new color picker. That's the most exciting big part to me, at least in Mike's playing with it earlier today, based on, I think it was your post, wasn't it, Jen? Did you write that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me and Anna.
At least on iOS, you can pop it open and you can actually see P3 color stuff in there. It's the first color picker I've ever seen that has that in there.
Yeah, it's exciting. Anna van Kesteren worked on this, both implementing and writing the article and getting it into the HTML specification. So for instance, maybe it's easiest to think about RGB. There's a way you can define an RGB color that is inside the sRGB color space, where red, green, and blue go from 0 to 255. But when you say something like, I don't know, 16, 27, 300, or 201, you're defining the amount of red, green, and blue color inside the sRGB color space. But you can also define an RGB color in P3, where even those same numbers would end up being a different color because you're mathematically talking about the amount of red, green, and blue inside the P3 color space. So it's true. I mean, Safari shipped support for wide gamut color, I think, almost a decade ago, if not longer. And the other browsers finally caught up like last year, I think. But yet, you're right, the color pickers, it's not until just now. When did we ship this? 17.4. So we shipped it last year, 17.4, but we wrote about it just now in this May, where
the improved color picker was out a year ago.
Oh wait,
That's
no,
wild.
sorry, I sped read my article incorrectly. Where is support?
And it's even so, it's not just like a big toggle at the top that says.
Oh, we shipped it in
P3 or
18.4. Sorry, we did just ship it. So I said that was 18.4. We shipped it just now in March.
As far as I can tell, 18.4 on iOS or whatever. Or do I have that wrong? 'Cause I couldn't get it to come up in desktop Safari.
Yeah, it should work, I think.
Okay, I'll try it again. But what do you expect to see in there? Can we like describe for people what? Yeah,
there's two things that it can do. And yeah, both the color pickers in Safari on both macOS, iOS, iPadOS, visionOS, that's not a both, all four of them, are operating system style controls. Like they look like the operating system. And so if you put colors, like as an attribute, input type equals color, color space equal display dash P3, then it will switch the color picker into the P3 color space and support P3 color. And if you add the attribute alpha, then it adds an opacity slider alpha transparency slider to the color picker so that you can specify
nice.
the color.
Can you see? I'm going to try to do it so we can all talk about what we're seeing. So I'm in Safari.
Yeah.
Ooh, am I behind or am I right on?
I can't
18.4?
see.
Oh, I know. It must
really
be
tiny for me.
I have this huge screen. So it's 18.4. And now we get this. So first you pop open in Safari, you get this color picker thing, and it doesn't give you it just gives you swatches, which is probably actually kind of nice. Most people are like, red, please, But if you say show colors, then you get the OS level one. So I guess there's both. Like Safari's doing this, but Mac OS is doing this. It's like a little split responsibility thing.
Yeah. And see how there's an opacity slider? Yeah.
Yep. And that's because I put the keyword alpha there, right?
Yep.
So we have that now. Pretty cool. And then there's a sliders, or this is where I had trouble, I think. Maybe it's here.
Yeah.
On iOS, this hex color thing has a thing you can click on. You can switch it to P3, which is amazing to me. But I'm just not seeing it here, but that's okay. Maybe I'm just behind on my operating system a little bit or something like that.
Well, and it does get complicated. Like, I don't know that I could explain to you how the color pickers work in all their different flavors, because it definitely.
Are we going to get color space crayons? Because that was always the best feature of Mac OS. Some crayons.
The other thing you can do is when you start, by default, if you don't give your input type equals color a value, the swatch, the chosen color will start as black. But if you want to, now you can define a value using OK Lab, OK,
that rules.
LCH, Lab, LCH, the color with the display P3 values, like all the different ways you can define color, you can now define inside value. And you can just specify colors that only exist in the P3 color space, and they will then appear in the color picker and such.
This is very gratifying. It seems like the last mile for this.
We definitely have more ideas about how to enhance the color picker, and in fact, Anna would love to hear from you. There's his Blue Sky account is linked to at the bottom of the article, because for sure there's more that could be done. Color, you think it's so simple, and then it turns out to be so complicated.
My favorite color picker is the in Keynote, like when you pick a color, it just has like 12, and they're really nice. And I just have decided, like, when I do a Keynote, those are my 12. Like, I don't care. I just want, I don't want to pick. So, but yeah, that's kind of not consistent, like not all apps do that. And
should pass a data list into a color picker, Chris.
There should. Let's have a new web manifest, a new link element in the header that says these are the 12 colors that should show up.
We added to the color picker in Web Inspector, we added a feature where all of the colors that are defined in your variables show up in the color palette of those little swatches in the Web Inspector color palette.
How does it know?
It looks in your CSS and it sees all your variables that are colors, and then it puts them in your
looks like a color. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Big fan.
That's cool. Well, unfortunately, I have a million more questions, but I do have a meeting, a hard stop here.
Do typography,
or
we'll
item
do it again.
flow, or shape. So we'll have to follow up later. We'll get Jen back on. Jen, thank you for coming on the show. For people who aren't following you and giving you money, how can they do that?
I would just love for people to go read webkit.org. And I will say, like, the things that we didn't talk about today, but we wanted to, are that there are so many improvements to typography that have been happening over the last several years that I feel like, when we didn't have web fonts and then we had web fonts, it was this giant revolution. And then I think most people think that typography has just stayed the same ever since. But there has been so much happening. And a lot of it's little tiny details like line height units, and now you can define a lot of your layout using the line height of your text as a unit, and that helps you start to establish vertical rhythm. And so I've been writing a lot of articles about all of these things because I think especially when you put them together, they end up being very profound, and mean that lots of things that people have gotten used to about web typography, like, that's just how it is on the web. It looks kind of weird. It looks a little janky. Like, it's just not the era we live in anymore, and people should raise their expectations and do more to design to today's capabilities rather than to the limitations of 10 years ago. And then, yeah, item flow. You all did a great show about item flow and the ideas of how specifically FlexFlow and Grid Autoflow could be combined to a new item flow set of features.
Yeah, it was pretty wild that it's not just like, let's solve masonry. It's like, let's give ourselves even more possibility.
Yeah. So. And some of the things like Flexbox with balanced wrapping, what's the deal with masonry now? There's a part 2 article coming that's half written that needs to get finished. Maybe in the next couple of weeks I'll start to have time open up in my schedule where I can get back to it. But explaining, because there's not consensus. There's still not consensus about exactly how it's going to work. So that's why it's not an easy, quick thing to explain. But.
Yeah, it feels good. It feels like we're in a good spot. I was very curious, but it could be an hour-long show. Yeah.
Maybe hear it from other browsers too.
But meanwhile, what I meant to say is go to webkit.org for more, because all of this stuff is being written about there.
Yeah, and I was going to thank you. I was going to say too, I'm finding webkit.org and the Safari technical preview are really great for me to know what features are coming. I think I messaged you about anchor positioning is in technical preview, and it was not vibing with what our code, and so I was but you kind of explained to me, no, this is there's a lot going on, but I think it's cool that I can see where Safari's at, what's coming down the pipeline, what's, I can read the blog, I can read the release notes, it's cool because I feel like can kind of figure out what's happening, when things are about to come, and what I can use now,
Yeah. We've been putting a lot of effort into having day one comprehensive release notes for every beta. So folks should look they're on developer.apple.com, but if you just do a web search, you'll find them. The release notes for each beta as the beta comes out. And that will tell you for sure if something's going to be coming in a particular release. People often ask, hey, I saw you added this thing to Safari Technology Preview. Does that mean it's going to ship in the next version of Safari? And it's it might mean that, it might not mean that. But if you look at the beta, you'll know for sure that it's coming in the next release.
Beta's boom. Cool.
Yeah, so there's day one beta release notes, there's Safari Technology Preview release notes, and there's day one Safari release notes. All really good information. And not just features, but also bug fixes. We're at the point right now where we're trying to capture everything that matters to web developers.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, thanks again, Jen. And thank you, dear listener, for downloading this in your podcatcher of choice, watching on YouTube, whatever you're doing. Be sure to star heart, favorite it up. That's how people find out about the show. Like and subscribe, smash that bell. And then, join us on the cool ones, Mastodon or Blue Sky. Follow us there. And then, join us in the Discord, patreon.com/ShopTalkShow. And Chris, you got anything else you'd like to say?
Ooh, shoptalkshow.com.